I have learned the hard way that the oil you trust can change the course of a brain in the time it takes to fry an egg, because in the United States, a person suffers a stroke about every 40 seconds, as reported by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and what lives in your skillet can nudge those odds without a sound. I do not want fear for you. I want control. So here is a small step you can do today. Use a fresh bottle of extra virgin olive oil for your next cook, and avoid any oil that has been reheated or looks dark, because tired oil behaves like fine grit against the inner lining of your arteries, and that irritation invites trouble. In my clinic years, I have watched numbers move when people make this one change. Cholesterol patterns soften, blood pressure breathes easier, and energy returns. Not because olive oil is magic, but because the brain thinks more clearly when blood flows without friction. The American Heart Association encourages replacing saturated and artificial trans fats with unsaturated fats, and large studies in respected neurology and cardiology journals connect higher intake of trans fats with more inflammation and with a higher burden of events that deprive the brain of oxygen. That is the why beneath this simple choice. Your brain thrives when its highways stay open and calm. Certain processed fats roar like heavy trucks on a fragile bridge, while the monounsaturated fats in olive oil and the omega-3 fats in fish glide through and help clear the jam. I am not asking you to change everything. Keep the steps small and kind. Cook at home when you can. Reach for a fresh olive oil or a fresh avocado oil. Keep the heat moderate so the oil does not smoke, and pass on any fryer that runs the same oil from noon to night. Give yourself one calm meal today, and notice how your head and your heart feel afterward. Then we will build from there together. For most of my career, I have listened to people tell me that the secret to staying sharp was hidden in crossword puzzles or in long evenings of memory games. And while those habits can bring a pleasant sense of challenge, the truth that startled me and startled many of my patients is that the real contest for brain health is not won on the puzzle page, but in the frying pan. That is the unsettling twist. We thought games would protect us. Yet the oil in the skillet often carries more weight for the future of our memory than the clues in a newspaper. Let me be clear. I will never tell you to throw away your puzzle books, because keeping the mind active is one part of a healthy routine. But I will tell you that the risk comes when you rely only on games and ignore the daily tide of fats entering your bloodstream. Scientific work from Harvard and Mayo has drawn a clear line between certain fats that inflame the brain and others that protect it, showing us that the choice between damage and defense can be as small as the oil you drizzle across a pan. That is both sobering and hopeful, because the same shelf that hides oils linked with stroke and memory loss also holds the bottles that steady circulation and protect recall. In this journey, I will uncover 5 kinds of fat that quietly build risk and 5 that quietly guard your brain. And I will give you small substitutions that are easy, safe, and affordable. Think of it as learning to read your kitchen shelf like a medicine shelf, where each item can either sandpaper the lining of your arteries or smooth the path for clean blood flow. So the next time you reach for a puzzle at night, pause just long enough to ask yourself what oil touched your skillet today, because that simple choice may shape your tomorrow far more than a crossword clue ever will. I will never forget the moment a man in his late 60s looked at me in disbelief when I told him that the golden crisp of his favorite fries carried a danger to his brain greater than many of the habits he worried about. It was hard for him to imagine that the very foods that felt like comfort, the soft pastries that never seemed to spoil, the margarine spread across morning toast, the fried chicken that crunched with every bite, were all bound together by the same invisible thread called trans fat. These fats are born when manufacturers take a liquid oil and harden it through hydrogenation, a process designed to give food a longer shelf life and a texture we crave. The upside is clear to any shopper, because the food looks perfect and tastes indulgent, but the downside hides deep inside the body. Once eaten, these fats trigger inflammation in blood vessels, elevate the so-called bad cholesterol, and begin to erode the fine connections that allow memory to stay intact. The evidence is not rumor, but science. A study in the journal Neurology followed more than 1,600 older adults and revealed that those with higher blood levels of trans fat faced nearly a 50% higher chance of developing dementia, which is not a simple lapse of memory but the slow loss of independence itself. That is a cost no sweet roll can justify. Yet the way out is not complicated. If you see the words partially hydrogenated oil on a label, you have the power to set the item back on the shelf. If you long for something crunchy, fill a bowl with air-roasted vegetables or a handful of fresh nuts, and notice how satisfying it feels without feeding the fire of inflammation. Each small decision is like placing another stone in the wall that guards your brain. Begin tonight with that one act, and know that you are already changing the story of your health. I remember listening to a patient describe the comfort he found in the rich taste of butter on a hot biscuit and the sound of bacon snapping in a skillet, and I did not judge him because I know how deeply those flavors are tied to memory and tradition. That is the gift of saturated fat. It makes food satisfying, creamy, and full of warmth, but the gift comes wrapped with a hidden cost. Inside the bloodstream, these fats raise the level of low-density lipoprotein, the type of cholesterol doctors call bad, and over time this cholesterol builds like sludge in a narrow pipe until the space for blood to flow shrinks smaller and smaller. When less blood reaches the brain, less oxygen follows, and the stage is quietly set for clots and for strokes. To put it into perspective, a major review published in the British Medical Journal revealed that replacing only 5% of calories from saturated fat with healthier fats was enough to cut the risk of stroke by almost 20%. That is an extraordinary benefit for such a modest change. The temptation is to believe you must choose between taste and health, but the truth is kinder. You can enjoy flavor without sacrificing your brain. Try cooking your breakfast eggs in olive oil instead of bacon grease. Choose leaner cuts of beef, or experiment with a meat-free Monday to give your circulation a rest. These are not harsh rules but gentle swaps, each one like clearing another lane on a crowded highway so blood can move freely again. In making these small adjustments, you are not losing pleasure, you are gaining years of clearer thought and steadier strength. Your brain deserves that gift more than any fleeting burst of flavor. When I first learned about omega-6 in medical school, I was told it was an essential fat, and that word essential carried the comfort of safety, as if more would always be better. Decades of practice have taught me a different lesson. Omega-6 is necessary in modest amounts, but when it floods the diet without the steadying hand of omega-3, it becomes less of a friend and more of a saboteur. In the modern American kitchen, the balance has tipped so far that the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 can climb toward 20-1, when the human brain and heart are built to function best at closer to 4-1 or even 2-1. Imagine a seesaw left stuck high on one side, never swinging freely, and you will understand how this imbalance fuels silent inflammation. Research in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition has shown that those who carry this distorted ratio have more markers of inflammation and greater risk for cardiovascular disease, meaning that the very fat meant to protect ends up stirring harm. The attraction of omega-6 rich oils is easy to see because they are inexpensive, shelf-stable, and slip into countless packaged foods from crackers to salad dressings to fried meals. The danger is that they pile up unnoticed until the arteries smolder. The good news is you do not need to erase them completely. By swapping corn, soybean or sunflower oil for extra virgin olive oil or avocado oil, and by bringing in salmon, walnuts, chia, or flax, you invite balance back into the body. The clear advantage of this choice is calmer blood flow and a brain that can think without the background noise of inflammation. The only disadvantage is that it requires mindfulness, because these oils hide in nearly every processed aisle. But with awareness and a few steady changes, you can tip the seesaw back toward balance and give your body the even ground it was meant to stand on. One of the most sobering moments in my practice came when I looked at the cholesterol report of a man who believed he was safe. His numbers on paper looked ordinary, yet I knew he was walking straight toward a stroke. The danger was not in the quantity of cholesterol, but in its damaged state. Low-density lipoprotein is often called bad cholesterol, but it only becomes truly destructive when it is oxidized. Much like a piece of metal that begins to rust. Once that rust forms, it clings to the walls of arteries, sparks inflammation, and sets the stage for blockage. The lure of fried food is easy to understand because reused oil gives a crunchy texture and a familiar taste, and it is cheap comfort at the end of a long day. But that same darkened oil turns LDL into oxidized particles that injure vessels. Old animal fats that sit too long in a refrigerator can have the same effect. Studies in the journal Atherosclerosis have made it clear that people with higher levels of oxidized LDL face a much higher chance of stroke and of cognitive decline, even when their overall cholesterol readings suggest safety. That is the cruel irony. The test looks fine while the damage builds in silence. Yet there is a way forward. Decline the basket of fried food from a fryer that never rests. Cook at home when you can, using fresh oils and fresh meats. Protect yourself with foods rich in antioxidants, the bright berries, the deep green leaves, the calming cup of green tea, because these act as shields that prevent cholesterol from turning rancid. The advantage of these choices is a bloodstream that flows without obstruction and a mind that remains steady and clear. The disadvantage is the discipline of walking past the food stand that smells inviting, but what you gain is worth infinitely more. The freedom to think, to remember, and to live without the shadow of a sudden stroke. One of the most memorable conversations I had was with a man who smiled as he told me he had given up butter years ago for margarine because he wanted to take care of his heart. He believed he had made the smarter choice, yet I had to explain that the very spread he trusted might be working against him. That is the tricky appeal of hydrogenated oils. They keep cookies soft on the shelf, make pie crusts flaky, and allow margarine to glide across bread, even when chilled. On the surface, that convenience feels like progress, but underneath it hides a cost. Hydrogenation is the process that takes a liquid oil and turns it into a semi-solid fat, and in doing so, it creates trans fats. Food labels in the United States may legally claim zero trans fat if a serving contains less than half a gram, which means that 2 or 3 servings a day from different products can quietly add up until you have eaten several grams without ever seeing it on paper. The damage is compounded because these oils not only push up the bad cholesterol that clogs arteries, but also pull down the good cholesterol that normally clears the debris away. Studies in the journal Circulation have confirmed that diets heavy in hydrogenated oils raise the risk of ischemic stroke, the kind where a blood clot stops oxygen from reaching the brain. That is too high a price for the convenience of a long shelf life. Yet the way forward is not complicated. Instead of margarine, spread ripe avocado on toast, or enjoy the richness of a natural nut butter. When shopping, look for words that say non-hydrogenated, or choose to bake at home with simple ingredients where you know exactly what is in the mix. The advantage of these swaps is a bloodstream that runs cleaner and a memory that stays sharper. The only disadvantage is the small effort of paying attention, but that effort is one of the simplest and most powerful investments you can make in your brain. In all my years of practice, I have found nothing that nourishes the brain as completely as omega-3 fatty acids, and I often tell my patients that if the brain were an engine, this would be its cleanest fuel. What makes omega-3 so remarkable is that it works on several fronts at once. It cools the fires of inflammation, it keeps the river of blood moving without turbulence, and it prevents platelets from clumping into the clots that so often precede a stroke. The evidence is not small. A long-term study that followed more than 70,000 people revealed that those who regularly ate fish rich in omega-3 had a significantly lower risk of both ischemic stroke, where a clot blocks the flow, and hemorrhagic stroke, where a vessel bursts. That is a double shield for the brain. The benefit reaches even deeper because omega-3 is woven into the very walls of brain cells, making them more flexible and allowing signals to pass smoothly which may help slow the fading of memory that too often comes with age. The drawback is simple but real. Many Americans do not eat fish often, and the idea of sprinkling flax or chia on breakfast can feel foreign or bothersome. Yet the good news is that the brain does not ask for perfection. It asks for steady care. Place salmon on your table twice a week. Blend a spoonful of ground flax into a smoothie, or keep a handful of walnuts in your pocket for the afternoon. These small acts are like filling the tank with clean energy day after day. With every choice, you send your brain the message that it is worth protecting. And over time, those choices stack up into sharper thought and a steadier life. In my own kitchen and in the kitchens of countless patients, I have watched a quiet truth take shape. That the fats we once feared can in fact become guardians when chosen with care. I no longer think of healthy fat as a single hero, but as a family of allies, each one carrying a unique gift for the brain. Monounsaturated fats from olive oil, avocados, and almonds have shown again and again that they lower the cholesterol that clogs while lifting the cholesterol that clears, leaving vessels open and blood flowing cleanly. The advantage is a steady supply of oxygen to the brain, though the small drawback is that extra calories can creep in if we pour too freely. Polyunsaturated fats from walnuts, sunflower oil, and flax work quietly to lower triglycerides and ease circulation, which means the heart works less and the brain receives more fuel. The only disadvantage is that these oils can turn rancid if forgotten in the pantry, so freshness is vital. Medium-chain triglycerides from pure coconut oil are another fascinating ally. They do not linger in storage but move quickly into energy, offering the brain a burst of clarity, though taken in excess they can unsettle the stomach, reminding us that balance is always the rule. Then there are phospholipids, found in egg yolks and soybeans, the very building blocks of brain cells. They act like the insulation on electrical wires, keeping signals crisp and strong so memory and mood stay intact. The sad irony is that many people toss away the yolk out of fear, losing nutrients that could help them think more clearly. The hopeful message is that you do not need rare pills or exotic powders to protect your brain. A drizzle of olive oil, a handful of nuts, a spoonful of ground flax, a touch of coconut oil in coffee, and the simple choice to keep the whole egg can all be powerful medicine in disguise. Taken together, these fats do not steal from us. They give back, provided we welcome them with balance and with respect. As we come to the end of this journey through the hidden harms and the quiet healers of dietary fat, I want to remind you of one essential truth. The story of your brain is not sealed. Each meal you prepare and each ingredient you choose is a fresh sentence in that story, and it is never too late to write a brighter chapter. I have cared for men and women well into their 70s and even their 80s who began with the smallest of steps: a switch from margarine to olive oil, a handful of walnuts stirred into oatmeal, and with time their lab results softened, their circulation steadied, and their thinking grew clearer. That is the beauty of these choices. They do not demand perfection or deprivation. They simply ask for steady attention, and the reward is strength that accumulates year by year. The only barrier is the doubt that such tiny acts could matter. Yet research shows that even replacing 5% of daily calories from saturated fat with healthier fats reduces the risk of stroke by nearly 1/5. Every drizzle of olive oil, every spoon of flaxseed, every serving of fish is not just food, but fuel and structure for the very cells that hold your memories. I invite you to look at your kitchen not as a place of routine, but as a workshop of resilience where you are either quietly building or quietly breaking. The hopeful truth is that you can begin today with what you already have at home. Share this message with a friend or a loved one. Talk about one small swap you will both try this week and watch the difference it makes. If you found value here, I welcome you to stay with me, to continue learning and caring, because your willingness to listen tells me you already honor your health. Let us keep walking together, one small choice at a time, toward a sharper and stronger tomorrow.